Welcome, everybody. Here at the Mitchell Center, this is part of our Sustainability Talk series. I'm David Hart, and I'm going to go fast because I want to let the students have time to talk. So, time for the first talk. I'm just going to mention the titles and then let the students talk about their work. Title here, Tapping into Unmet Demand for U.S. Seafood. Can Maine lead the way? Welcome.
Hello and welcome. My name is Melisa Uyar. I'm a PhD student from the School of Economics.
Hi everyone, I'm Rafiul Ahmed. I am also a graduate student in School of Economics.
And we are working alongside Professors Evan and Professors Noblet to explore seafood demand across the US. First, why study US seafood demand? Americans persistently do not eat enough seafood based on US dietary guidelines. We also know that Americans are willing to consume more seafood according to recent trends. Given this market of potential seafood consumers, Maine can use its reputation to address this untapped market demand. Our study focuses on barriers to at-home seafood consumption and the faces behind the demand. For this talk, we want to find out about those who reported wanting to eat or prepare more seafood at home. Most of our sample from both survey locations want to do so. We analyzed the reasons preventing them from preparing more seafood at home. We can see that cost is the main individual barrier faced. But what about co-occurrences of barriers? What about people who think that not only is it too expensive, but they don't know how to prepare seafood? We know individuals likely experience a combination of these barriers to varying degrees. Co-occurrences of barriers are analyzed by grouping together individuals with similar barrier profiles across these three categories: price, knowledge, and preferences. Our results are shown on the next slide, namely the faces behind the demand.
All right. This is the most novel and interesting part of this study where we are exploring the results. So we analyze the socio-demographic characteristic of individuals who face a similar kind of barrier profile. For example, if you focus on group 4, you will find that the individual over there are facing high price, high barrier, high preference and we are calling them seafood skeptics. And on the other side of the extreme, if you focus on group 5, you will find that there are ready-to-go consumers who are facing low barriers across all themes. But there are some interesting combination of barriers between these two extremes. And we wanted to know, like, who are these people? So we kind of created a socio-demographic channel just to create and explore the groups. So if you just focus on group 2, which is the middle ground, who are facing mid-level barrier on price, mid-level barrier on knowledge, but low barrier on preferences. You find that they are middle-aged group who have higher income and education compared to the average. And we specifically tried to find unique attributes for each group because this insight could be a big differentiator for the industry stakeholder. And among these three categories of barriers, preference is something where stakeholders cannot direct intervene. But there are two other levers, price and knowledge, where something could be done. So for knowledge, running quick, evidence-based how to buy store and campaigns, partnering with Maine tourism to build confidence at the counter. For price, using efficient technology to cut cost, selling a sustainability story to signal value, and scaling through co-ops could be a good option. And here comes how Maine could actually lead this sustainable way of aquaculture. To be really honest, Maine could actually lead by building what they always have: trust and reputation, using tourism as a gateway, let visitors learn and test, and let them carry the story back home. Brand surrounding clean water and sustainability to reach high value market and pair that with innovation so that consumer friendly format and data driven targeting could be reached. As most of you have already realized that seafood and sustainability, they're closely connected, especially with Maine's global iconic reputation of cool and clean waters. Addressing this identified market demand could contribute to economic and environmental well-being for sustainability of a state rich with marine resources like Maine. And some of our future research is also directly connected with this sustainability theme, where we are exploring how visitation in Maine could shape their perception about marine environmental quality, seafood quality, and some other associated. And we thank all the people for here standing, and we thank our project partners. Thank you.
All right. The next talk is a remote talk. And the title of this one is Building a Greener Maine, Reducing Concrete's Carbon Footprint and Cracking.
Okay, hello, my name is Erfan Najaf. I'm from Civil Engineering Department. And today my topic is about reducing concrete's carbon footprint and cracking. So one of our biggest problems in Maine, especially in cold weather, is early age cracks in bridge. So Maine DOT should spend a lot of money for repairing bridge and concrete bridge because we have a lot of problems with crackings, again, especially in cold, and it's happened in other states like New Hampshire and Boston. So we are going to find ways to reducing these cracks, also making our concrete more sustainable. So today we have two approaches. One of them is giving different mix design to Maine DOT to reduce cement. Then we can have less cement. That means less CO2, and it's completely sustainable. And we will not have any cracks. And second solution is using cellulose nanofibers. For first scenario, we suggested four different mix designers to Maine DOT. Everything is same except the cement amount. So we used less cement amounts in mix design number 4, as you can see, and everything is same: coarse aggregates, fine aggregates, and water. After that, we did some tests like compressive strength test, flexural strength test, and some shrinkage test. And one of the most important things for concrete bridge is the compressive strength test. With using our mix design, we can reach the very good and based on the Maine DOT standards compressive strength test with using less cement. That means when we are using less cement, we will not have any cracks, because cracks happen when we are using a lot of cement. And with using these aggregates instead of cement, we can have very sustainable concrete. And with its flexural strength test, it's very important again for bridge. As you can see, for our suggested mix design, we can have a very good flexural strength test. And one of tests is shrinkage. Concrete do shrink during time, especially in first days. With our suggested mix design, again, we can have less shrinkage, means less cracks. And then we did a research, sustainable research, that we call it life cycle impact assessment with OpenLCA software. We can see 4 different mix designs, and in all categories, for example, acidification or climate change or global warming potential, our suggested mix design, I mean the mix design number 4, is the best one, and we can have 40% less CO2 or 30% less acidification. And for second scenario, we are using CNF, that is cellulose nanofibers. This material is completely sustainable, and University of Maine is one of the biggest, and I can say, company that they are making cellulose nanofibers here at university, and they come from cellulose, so they are completely sustainable. we are using a very small amount of these, so it can be very cheap for any projects. As you can see, we have SEM image. The right image shows cellulose nanofibers in our concrete, and the left one is the specimens without any fibers. We added very small amounts.
Minute left, Efron. 1 minute
Sorry.
left.
Yeah, sure. We added very small amount, 0.3%, and we reached very good compressive strength. We reached very good flexural strength, and again, shrinkage was very important for us. We reached less shrinkage. So at the end, we reached two scenarios. The first one, if we use less cement but good aggregates, we can have less cracks and sustainable concrete. And if we add very small amount of CNF, we can have 10% more fractural strength and compressive strength and very sustainable concrete. Thank you very much.
So the next talk the title is Investigating PFAS Contamination from Cleaning and Waxing Products in Maine Schools through a Participatory Action Research Project.
Okay. Thanks everyone for being here today. I'm really excited to share about the research I've been working on this past year for my honors thesis. My name is Eddie Nakmi, and I'm a senior in the Ecology and Environmental Sciences undergraduate program. I'm being advised on this project by Dr. Rachel Chapman, an associate professor in the School of Food and Agriculture, and I'm working on this project in partnership with researchers at the MDI Biological Laboratory as an academic year fellow. So to begin, I'll provide some background and context for the research. PFAS are man-made compounds with unique properties such as water and heat resistance, which have made them ubiquitous in a variety of different industrial, medical, and consumer applications. The state of Maine began investigating risks from PFAS compounds after contamination was discovered at a dairy farm in Arundel in 2016. PFAS compounds have been shown to have a variety of dangerous health effects, including increased risk of certain cancers, kidney diseases, reduced vaccine response, hormone disruption, and developmental problems in newborns. So, beginning in 2017, the Maine CDC investigated public drinking water systems, including schools and public water supplies. Last year, a report from the New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services was published, which linked high PFAS levels in drinking and wastewater sources at schools to floor waxing, stripping, buffing, and cleaning products used by school facility staff. These elevated PFAS concentrations have startling implications for the health and well-being of children and staff who have been unknowingly drinking contaminated water. This figure comes from a research letter published last year by my collaborators at MDI Biological Laboratory. It shows how schools with septic systems and wells may be self-contaminating their drinking water supply from wastewater infiltrating from leach fields into drinking water wells. Further, this research showed the potential for PFAS from school leach fields to contaminate nearby residential drinking water wells. This study did not concretely identify sources of contamination within the school system, but did test for waxing solutions used in the school, which had high concentrations of PFAS compounds. And this is really the research gap that I'm trying to address with my honors thesis. So from what sources are PFAS compounds getting into school drinking water supplies? And our first step in answering that question has been to identify where contamination has been happening. So I conducted some geospatial analysis using data from the Maine CDC drinking water program. This map shows schools that had drinking water levels which exceeded state legislated thresholds with dots that are proportionally sized by the level of threshold exceedance. So you can see that the dots that are larger indicate a more severe level of contamination. And also with these threshold limits, it's kind of hard to conceptualize. So just to provide some context, 1 part per trillion, which is the measurement that you see up there, That's the size of one drop of water in 20 Olympic-sized swimming pools, so very small concentrations. The next phase of my research will include working with school stakeholders and partners to disseminate a survey to facility staff to learn about their floor maintenance practices, as well as the type of water system that the school is using. Additionally, after completing the survey, schools will have the option to participate in a site visit where I will inventory their floor maintenance products and collect samples of products to confirm the presence of PFAS compounds. We anticipate a maximum of 221 schools participating in the survey and up to 20 schools participating in the site visits between November 2025 and February 2026. The data from the survey and site visits will be analyzed in R to determine correlations between products used for maintenance and contamination from certain PFAS compounds in drinking water. This analysis will culminate in a community meeting where school administrators are briefed on what we learned about specific floor maintenance products and their potential implications for contamination. Depending on the results of our analysis, we will prepare recommendations on products of concern or changes in waste management practices to protect children from the health risk posed by PFAS compounds. Thanks for your time today, and please feel free to reach out if you have additional questions.
Okay, so the next talk title is People, Coast and Offshore Wind Energy Development, Reflections from a Mixed Methods Study.
So my name is Amber Schultz. I'm a master's student in ecology and environmental science. This is Harry Arden. He's a PhD student in ecology and environmental science. And we're being advised by Caroline Noblette and Teresa Johnson on our project, People, Coast and Offshore Wind Energy Development, Reflections from a Mixed Methods Study in Maine. And I focused on the interviews in the methodology, and Harry focused on the survey work.
Thank you very much, Amber. And so our research concerns with coastal people. So all over the world, just like in Maine, we know that coastal places are very complex zones with so much expectations of them to meet various needs of humans. Of these needs includes energy, which is becoming a pressing issue in every place. Now, to understand the people and their relationship with the coast, as complex as it is, requires rigorous and multidisciplinary approaches that will help us to better navigate these issues. Otherwise, we'll only end up with spillover effects that will rather issues in coastal regions. Now, this led us to the approach of our research, where we deploy multidisciplinary approach involving researchers across the east and west coast of US, of which my co-advisors and other collaborators from Oregon State University and all other places contributed to this research. Now, we deployed a mixed methods approach in which we use a qualitative research, which involved the deployment of interviews, as well as quantitative approach, which involved the deployment of surveys using drop-off pickup methods, which is very key to this research, as well as embedded in it called the conjoined experiment design, where we explore people's perceptions about offshore wind energy development, as well as how they want benefit schemes to be modeled for the collective benefit of everyone in the communities. Now, our research focused on two main coastal communities in the state of Maine. Now, including Searsport and Yarmouth, where we focus our data collection. We have so far collected over 25 key informant interviews and have also done close to 500 surveys. Now, emerging insights so far from the research using the qualitative research approach involves a lot of the stakeholders being so much interested in how the benefits from this project called offshore wind energy development would inure to them as a people, and at the same time inure to the environment in which they applied their livelihood. Now, there were also concerns about stakeholder engagement. How can the whole project of community benefit agreement be modeled so that everybody will be involved, so that it's not just be a few people that would contribute to the whole design, as well as equity and justice concerns that will be modeled from the local to regional levels, and that will also align with the global sustainability goals. Now, the key lessons that we came out with this research is that if you want to research coastal place-based issues, there's a need to bring on board people across various fields of research. And this was what we were able to do by bringing people from economics, from social science, from public policy, that all contributed to the design of this research. Now, it's also very important to do broad stakeholder engagement where you involve community folks, understanding their issues from the very level that stays so that we can design research approaches that will resolve the issues, as well as the technique that we deployed called the drop-off pickup method. We have identified that it's very effective when you are researching coastal issues, but at the same time, it could be expensive and it could also be laborious. And so it should be done with supplementary methods like mailing surveys. Now, our next step is to enter our data, clean, analyze, and come out with some research dissemination, where we also as well get more responses through supplementary means. We thank the Department of Energy for supporting our data collection. However, the grant has since been terminated, or we got support from the US Department of Agriculture as well. Thank you very much.
So then the title of the next talk, Sandbagging the Future in the Fog of Uncertainty. Still foggy places along the coast.
Hi, everybody. My name is Melisa Godin, and I'm a second-year master's student in the Resource Economics and Policy program. And this talk outlines an ongoing study about how people make climate-related decisions. And for my project, I'm testing two things, and that's how far people plan ahead for climate resilience at home in their own household, and whether that matches how they think their community should plan. And this photo and a recent headline from Portland Press Herald about the Spurwink Marsh actually illustrates the challenge of planning for climate change, because in this instance, two affluent towns in Maine, Scarborough and Cape Elizabeth, they couldn't agree with what to do about this road that frequently floods. One town, despite having a robust climate resilience plan, rejected $2 million in grant money to remove the road and restore the marsh. And the alternatives are basically spending $5 million on another culvert that still floods, or $10 million on a bridge, or just doing nothing, which is what the current plan is. Let's see, and why do people make irrational decisions? Well, in economics, we often start by assuming people make rational choices based on their income, their time, the information that they have. But in real life, behavior is messier. We focus on the present more than the future. We avoid stressful choices, and we struggle to plan for uncertain events. But the issue isn't necessarily that people don't care, it's that we just have limited bandwidth and predictable biases. And if you don't think this is going to happen to your basement or your apartment, then why buy expensive insurance? And so how are people making these decisions about the future? Well, the problem with the type of short-term thinking that I was just talking about is that it can snowball and become a behavioral trap. Stress, shocks, unstable housing, and information overload are all associated with patterns in choosing these kind of short-term fixes that can have substantial costs later. And so given all of this, my main research question is, which factors make people short-term planners for their household? And do these same factors also shorten how they plan for their community? And my hypothesis is that although the planning horizons for the two aren't identical, I think that they're related because the factors that raise stress and uncertainty shorten planning horizons for both. And that those kind of beliefs include climate and income, climate skepticism, and even political or institutional instability like we're facing now. And so I will test this with a mixed method experiment. And the first part is just going to be a basic Qualtrics survey. I'm gonna ask people how far they plan ahead about their climate beliefs and other different demographic variables. And the second part is actually going to use O-Tree, which is a web-based framework that can do experimental interactive games. And I'm going to ask users to play a budget game and do things like have climate-related shocks and questions to measure whether they are short-term or long-term planners, both for themselves and their own household choices and their communities. And these are some examples of the questions I'll be asking them in Qualtrics to collect some baseline data. I'm going to ask some questions to build up a financial index. And one of those is, could you afford a $500 or $400 emergency? Another one for housing index is, do you buy flood insurance? climate related questions like how often do you think about climate change? Do you believe in climate change? And uncertainty questions related to things like, do you think that FEMA is reliable? And this is an example of some of the vignettes that I'm working on right now to build up my O Tree game. And I'm going to have them play different rounds or different months and have different things happen to them. This is an example of month one is baseline, just to collect some information. People are given a budget, they are asked if they want to spend, if they want to save, and in other months they might experience a climate shock. And we know that people choose between spending now or later and a quick cheap fix or bigger fix that pays off later. And if we know if they're going to pick those short-term things, then they're a short-term planner. And my expected results are that income and climate stress factors will negatively impact planning horizons, but household versus community planning might be different. And an example of this is like a medium income resident might skip flood insurance for now because it's not affordable to them, but they might still favor using their tax dollars to upgrade culverts so that they can reduce road flooding. Or a high income owner may harden their landscape to prevent flooding and preserve their own property, but they might vote against managed retreat for flood prone roads in their town. Thank you. Oh, thank you to Carol Noblet, my advisor, and Kelsey Hobbs and Jonathan Malcarney in the School of Economics for helping me advise my thesis.
Next talk, increasing access to equitable, sustainable energy transitions through co-designed community microgrids.
Hi everyone, I'm Katie and this is Hamza. We're both master's students in the Resource Economics and Policy program, and we're advised by Dr. Sharon Klein, who's on today. Hi Sharon. Today we're going to talk about our research related to co-design of community microgrids and how that relates to the equitable and sustainable energy transition. So before we get into our research at all, we're going to super quickly define what a microgrid is. You can think about the really large electric grid and then envision a smaller, more localized version of that. So microgrids can operate while they're connected to the main grid or independently, and they often combine renewable generation with storage. And so because of this, they're beneficial for energy independence, resilience, and community control. So we're currently in the literature review process of our research, but this is the first step in many that will culminate in us working with the Maine community to develop a microgrid. 5 questions we were looking at related to our literature review were the common types of microgrids in the US, how communities engage in the co-design process, how their engagement influences the success of a microgrid, ownership models, and how they support the community benefits, and then barriers and opportunities related to community-led microgrids. And we also wanted to bring up that this whole larger research process has been a very interdisciplinary approach where we're working with and learning with many jurisdictions from different US states and territories and across disciplines from engineers, social scientists, policy researchers, and more. And so the bridging of this technical and these social priorities is essential for the success of this project. And then thinking about community engagement and how it affects a microgrid success. Engagement is important in both the initial installation and then also the continued operation of the microgrid. So workshops, surveys, etc., that communities are able to participate in helps build trust and bridge gaps between researchers and engineers. And collaboration with utilities through data sharing is also super important. And then localized organizations and government partnerships can help bridge gaps as well. So in sum, microgrids need to be built from the community level using community perspectives, their needs, and open and extensive communication is important throughout the whole process.
So this brings us to a critical question, which is which ownership models do actually support the community, which are like just facts. So studying the existing literature, review articles, as well as several like microgrid projects, the answer became clear that successful projects are not built for a community, it's built with the community. And the good thing about this is like ownership is a key role that attributes to the success of a community. If we can see like the table in the upper columns, the hybrid partnerships and community tribal ownerships, these are the type of ownerships that offers the most control to a community. And because of that, they feel like the project is something that's personal to them, which fosters long-term growth and long-term maintenance of the project leading to its like long-term success. And we talked about the theoretical side of the projects, but now I'm gonna present to you like two examples of case studies. The first is Molokai, which is a hybrid model because here like there was a community-led organization that partnered with the local utility as well as schools, the local school system. One might ask why the local school system, because it has like parents, student bodies, and everyone else. So it was a community thing that everyone feel included and felt responsible to work for it or to learn technical assistance. And the second one is in northern Alberta, Fort Chipman, Canada. It is a tribal ownership because that area resides three different nations, and instead of working alone, they build their own electric company. It's called the Three Nations Energy, and they partner with ATCO, which is the Alberta Trailer Company, like its older name, and they just now massively handles solar microgrids powered by solar panels, and this has helped them in economic viability and everything else. Now, this is one of the most important slides. That what are the opportunities and what are the barriers? Like we've seen the success stories, but the main problem is the barriers are more than the opportunities because number one, it's high upfront costs, which is related to the funding and the long-term maintenance costs and everything else. Other than that, the main problem that we found is the lack of community-centric design. From that, I mean that when, like I said, when people work for the community and not with them, it makes them feel like they are the owners. It makes the utility or someone else like it makes them feel like they're the owners, which leads to certain disengagement from the project and everything. And this is the conclusion. Yeah.
Thank you.
Mention two more. First is coating cellulose nanofibrils and polyvinyl alcohol on paper as an alternative to perfluoroalkane substances.
Hey, I'm Clara Thompson. I'm an undergraduate chemistry major here at the University of Maine, and I'm currently working in Dr. William Bramlich's lab, which mostly focuses on polymers and using CNFs and finding environmentally friendly alternatives to industrial products. My current project is coating cellulose nanofibrils and polyvinyl alcohol on paper as an alternative to perfluoroalkane substances. So as a background, PFAS, which is the abbreviation, are chemicals with at least one perfluorinated methyl group or perfluorinated methylene group. And they have been used as a coating on paper for food packaging, particularly with fast food, as these coatings have good grease barrier and water barrier properties. However, they have poor oxygen barrier properties, and petroleum-based plastics are often used to supplement this. PFAS is very chemically stable, which means it's resistant to degradation and tends to accumulate in the environment. So it gets into water sources, air, organisms, and us. It has been linked to high cholesterol, endocrine disruptions such as fertility issues and thyroid function issues, and is possibly carcinogenic. Because of this, the FDA has raised concerns about using it in packaging, and it's been phased out as a barrier. So this leads to my research, which is finding an alternative coating using cellulose nanofibrils and polyvinyl alcohol composites. This research is funded by the U.S. Department of Agriculture and is for agricultural research here at the University of Maine. The goal of this funding is actually to increase usage of forest bioproducts because Maine's economy is very dependent on the pulp industry, so it's partially to increase our economy. And it's also looking to replace plastic with paper-based packaging, as that is considered much more sustainable. And then our research goals align with this as we're trying to find environmentally friendly alternatives for PFAS and petroleum-based plastics. So cellulose nanofibrils, abbreviated as CNFs, are cellulose fibers that are refined to nanofibers using mechanical grinding. So essentially 2 metal plates are ground together with CNF in between until you get fibers that are on the nanoscale. The more refined the CNF is, the more nanofibers are present. Some pros for using this as a coating on paper is it is a forest bioproduct and is biodegradable and non-harmful to the environment. And it's a very good grease barrier. However, it's a hydrophilic compound, which makes it a poor water barrier. And it's also a poor oxygen barrier for lower quality CNFs, especially ones that are at a lower level of refinement. My research focus is using 70% fine CNF. Percent fines is a measure of refinement, and a higher percentage correlates to a higher level of refinement. As mentioned above, there's poor oxygen barrier for these lower refinements, and this is because when you have larger, fewer fibers, when you have a fiber network, there are more pores for oxygen to get through. And so this research is looking to use polyvinyl alcohol, also known as PVOH, to fill in the pores of this network to create that oxygen barrier. And PVOH is a polymer that can be bioderived and is much more biodegradable compared to petroleum-based plastics. And then coatings are also performed on water-resistant paper to add that water barrier property. So an overview of the coating process is a sheet of water-resistant paper is soaked through with water, laid on top of this vacuum filtration sheet that was designed by the chemical engineering department. And a CNF solution is coated on top, and the vacuum pulls the water through, leaving a layer of dried CNF on top of the paper. The thickness of the 2 black strips on either side of the filter sheet can be varied, and this will change the target basis weight of your CNF. Basis weight is a measurement in the paper industry that indicates how thick paper is. For this research, we're looking at the grams per area of CNF on paper, which is what we refer to as the basis weight. So just as an overview of some of the results we've been seeing, we've been getting lower than desired basis weights on some of our coatings, and this may be due to the lower percent fines of CNF as they tend to clump together when you have larger fibers. And there's also been the potential that our stock solution of CNF has had a change in its weight percent because it's not a very uniform mixture. As you pull from the stock, you can actually change the weight percent of CNF suspended in it. And some solutions to this are using a non-hazardous salt called sodium carboxymethylcellulose to increase the suspension of CNF in your solution that prevents it from clumping. Thank you.
Let's talk impacts of climate language on rural Maine community resilience initiatives.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Sonia Leone. I'm a graduate student in ecology and environmental science, and today I'm going to be sharing the results of my honors thesis research, which I defended last spring. It's titled The Impacts of Climate Language on Rural Maine Community Resilience Initiatives. So this time last year, I presented a lightning talk on the very beginnings of this topic, so I'm really excited to share my findings with you guys today. This study was part of a larger research project led by Dr. Sharon Klein, which sought to identify and compare barriers, opportunities, and decision drivers of renewable energy and energy efficiency adoption in underserved communities. I believe Dr. Klein is here with us today over Zoom, and I'd love to thank her for her continued mentorship and support. The broader research project included collaboration with community partners on 2 participatory research teams, the community and Wabanaki Sustainable Energy teams, respectively. Our partners in their communities were key informants of this study, in which I considered their perceptions of renewable energy, resilience initiatives, and climate language. CBPR, or Climate Community-Based Participatory Research, is a research framework that grounds this study, and we can define it as the iterative engagement with community members as equal partners in study design and project implementation. So my work with our community partners and lots of reading about CBPR led to the development of my research questions, which are, firstly, what kinds of barriers and opportunities does climate language create in underserved rural Maine communities and Wabanaki tribes? And secondly, how can CBPR overcome these barriers to advance climate and energy resilience projects and create co-benefits for community well-being? More on this later. Essentially, my thesis compares published academic literature to the perspectives of rural communities about climate language and CBPR. The literature review findings are compared to two sets of participatory data. Firstly, data from 11 statewide interviews with the leaders of rural Maine municipalities, community organizations, and state programs. And secondly, data from 5 survey questions drawn from the Maine Community Alternative Energy Survey and the Wabanaki Alternative Energy Survey, respectively. Although I can't capture all of the nuance that I found in this 5-minute period, I can share some of the core highlights. So, recent literature about climate language and energy transitions finds some key barriers to community resilience initiatives, namely that right-leaning climate skepticism frequently uses very certain and definitive language to deny climate change. Climate science, on the other hand, and as many of us know, must use uncertain language to convey accuracy. Climate change and resilience projects can be very expensive, and rural communities struggling with capacity issues often can't justify investing in uncertainty. Climate jargon is often inaccessible and irrelevant to communities, and rural communities are often distrustful of institutions which they view as technocratic and elitist. Rural identities of rugged individualism and self-sufficiency further create barriers for community-led resilience initiatives. Despite all of these challenges, the literature also identified some key opportunities to work with communities towards resilience, including meeting communities where they are and exchanging local experiences with the changing environment rather than presenting climate change as this big sweeping concept. Working with bridging contacts or somebody who can help establish trust between the community and the researcher. Community co-benefits that span far beyond the resilience project itself, and it can include job production, public health, energy independence, and more. Finally, communicating transparently about what the project goals are, the risks, and the expectations to build trust between researchers and communities. CBPR is one way to bring these opportunities to life. Within the interview data for the study, 8 themes emerged as barriers of climate language, many of which I just talked about as part of the literature, including misinformation, language and jargon, institutional distrust, climate skepticism, political affiliations, energy perceptions, cultural dynamics, and financial capacity. Similarly, 5 themes of opportunity emerged and supported my literature findings, including language strategies, energy opportunities, building relationships, meeting people where they are, and co-benefits. For our survey data, I created maps for each respective survey that depicts the proportionate distribution of the 136 total responses we received. We examined responses across 5 survey questions about individual perceptions and motivations to adopt renewable energy and barriers for local government and where individuals look for trusted information. Respondents broadly reiterated the findings of both the literature review and the state interviews, voicing barriers of high energy burdens and upfront costs. However, participants were very open to renewable and resilience projects if they maximize socioeconomic co-benefits. Across the 3 components of the study, I found that community participants are calling for reciprocal relationships with institutions that support their local goals. Rural communities are often open to climate and energy resilience initiatives that maximize socioeconomic co-benefits. Literature about CBPR mostly aligns with findings from the data, but there's a real lack of literature about CBPR in the northeastern United States, particularly in rural Maine and the Wabanaki tribes. This conversation about climate language and CBPR is vital to produce equitable resilience solutions for communities in a time of increasing uncertainty. So since my successful thesis defense last April, I started my master's program in ecology and environmental science, and I'm continuing to build resilience research with Dr. Klein. I hope to further this work with a master's thesis that focuses on communicating climate uncertainty with rural populations. Thank you.
Okay, I'm gonna ask everybody who presented to come on up in the front, and for everybody else to start thinking of their questions if they haven't already done so.
Sonia, could you take your slides down, please?
Yes.
Thank you.
William, how are we doing with, you got some?
Yes, we have plenty of them.
Okay, so remember, we're gonna keep, if you have a question, try to, and you have more than one, try to pick one that can be answered in a short amount of time. We'll never finish. And we'll just do one question per presentation to kind of move things around a bit. Anybody from the room have a question or two? Sorry, just I said that wrong. Anybody in the room have one question for one of them? I have a bunch, but I'm just checking first. No? Okay. How about you, William? I can do some because I got a ton.
From the chat, there was a bunch of questions for Eddie, but I will pick just one. So besides cleaning fluids in the water, so I guess besides reducing the amount of fluids here, what other things can towns or schools do to sort of combat this?
Yeah. So one thing that I didn't really get into is that all these schools that are struggling with this have their own drinking water wells and then are on septic or have leach fields or leach ponds. So one possible solution is to then, whenever they're doing floor waxing, to collect that floor waxing wastewater and send it to a municipal treatment plant so that at least all of the PFAS can be dealt with in a concentrated way there rather than infiltrating into their water supply.
Okay, so I'm going to do one for Melisa and Rafiul on the unmet demand for US seafood. There's a lot of NIMBY issues that come up in Maine about aquaculture as one source of seafood. And just wondering where you think that fits in meeting this unmet demand. Not in my backyard, local opposition to any number of things, but land-based aquaculture is one of the places that's been happening right here in this part of Maine.
I think the way that seafood can address sustainability challenges would be through local aquaculture and adjustments to aquaculture products that already exist based on what market demand is out there. So I think that working with local communities would be an important part of understanding kind of the relationship that aquaculture has with coastal communities, which will be a very important part. Do you have anything to add?
Yeah, and also just to add with Melisa, as we have seen that the increase of demand for the seafood has been really drastically moving up. So the local level cooperation would be really fascinating to meet this demand. Thank you.
For Clara, one person in the chat asked, are there any major long-term health risks of using the CNF coating as opposed to PFAS? I know you said there's fewer, but what are some concerns there?
Concerns that I'm aware of when it comes to using CNF. In unscientific terms, it's basically tree pulp and is very water soluble. We're allowed to wash it down the drains in the lab.
Okay. So I'll do one for Melisa. Melisa, comparing kind of this bounded rationality, whatever you want to call it, between kind of a household view and a community level view. Maybe this is a version of what I asked earlier. There can be communities, conflict can arise with, I guess you made this point at the very end, right? Like somebody who's more affluent might think about this differently in terms of paying taxes. Where does that fit, and how does it play out differently at the community level than the household?
What exactly, like the?
Well,
Can you clarify?
the likelihood that you would be irrational in your planning horizon, how you think about that, might in turn be shaped by the likelihood that community conflict arises and differences in the community about that.
Yeah, so I think that there's a few things there, like obviously Maine, there's gonna be some very place-based community conflict, right? Whether that's in more affluent communities in southern Maine, or even maybe just in eastern Maine. There's a lot of cultural identity tied up with that and like what sort of decisions you want to make for your community there. So obviously, and even what decisions we make for our households to some extent will impact our community, right? Because FEMA flood insurance, you have to have town buy-in to get a subsidy on that, right? So I mean, I think that these relationships kind of go both ways. That's kind of why I'm interested in testing them together to see what those kind of relationships are without making any assumptions about the relationships there, just to ask the questions, collect the data and see what's going on.
Great.
For Erfan, if you're still on the Zoom call.
Yes.
Yeah. We had a question about your talk. One person asked if you had presented your findings to the Maine DOT, and then more generally, what were some variables that came up in your research that you didn't expect?
Yeah, the project was under TIDC and for Composite Center, so they report everything that every of our fundings to Maine DOT. So yes, we reported them, and there is a bridge in Millinocket or Milo. I think they tried to apply our results, and some of we had some problems like moisture effect and workability. So what we did in is in a smaller scale, but where we are going to apply it in a real bridge and real concrete. Definitely, you will have problems, for example, in workability or pumping concretes. So in future, we are trying to find a way to have a solution for them.
I'll do one for Sonia. The barriers and opportunities for reciprocal relationships, especially now that you're doing your master's work. What do you see as some of the barriers and opportunities for an institution like the University of Maine to meet communities where they are?
Yeah, I mean, calling to an upcoming talk at the Mitchell Center, I think being a boundary spanner is one major role that institutions like universities can play, where you're sort of playing this translational role of looking at like grant funding opportunities and jargon and kind of taking the whole research mishmash and then turning it into something that's relevant and useful for communities. And then in the reverse as well, listening to community problems, doing round robins at meetings, really just taking time to learn and listen, and then translating that into research work. I think it's a two-way street. It's reciprocal.
I'll do one more. Catherine and Hamza, you talked about bridging technical, social, and policy analysis. Any challenges there? Does it always work well? Anything you learned about how to do that?
To be honest, because like the engineers, they'll talk their own jargon, like as was the main function of this lightning talk, and the social scientists, they will talk about themselves, and the people are like just left clueless. And to bridge that gap, like I talked about Molokai and Hawaii, what they did, which was very interesting, was that they had everyone together and they like made an animated video to teach everyone like what certain stuff is about. Because like when Katie first talked about like microgrids, it's a difficult thing to explain to people like what a microgrid is. So like the language is the biggest barrier apart from other things.
Been at it for 20 years here. We're still learning how to do it. We're with you. I've lost track. Who hasn't had a question? Anybody? Anything? So I'm looking at my notes. So what was it about? I might have gone too fast, but are NIMBY issues arising in this wind energy development in different ways in places like Oregon and Maine?
So we haven't done a full analysis of all the data yet, particularly from the interviews where we're hearing more about NIMBYism, at least in Maine. So we haven't had a chance to compare the data, but in Maine, we're having a big problem with that in Searsport, where they would rather not necessarily not be in Searsport as an entirety, or it's the fact that it's on Sears Island and they would rather it be at Mac Point.
Well, lots of important things still to be done by all of you, but you've made a lot of great progress. Thank you all. Thanks, everybody.